Hi, RESO, and thank you for joining our panel on bringing rentals to the pros. I'm Chris Haran with MRED, also work group chair here at RESO. Very excited to talk about the rental market and how we can all better support it in organized real estate. I have two great panelists with me today, Ishai and Cameron. Ishai, if you could start by giving us a quick introduction about yourself and your company, and we'll follow up with Cameron.
Sure. Thanks, Chris. Glad to be here. I'm Ishai Greenberg, founder and CEO of Rental Beast. Started my career as a real estate agent, then became a managing broker, and kind of kept that license for 20 years. And operated and sold and rented real estate in both New York and Massachusetts before I founded Rental Beast.
And Cameron Payne, I'm Vice President of Industry Relations at Apartments.com. And, I got my start in real estate, at least, running a multiple listing service and ran one of the largest in the country for about 11 years. And then more recently, helped run a large national brokerage. And then now with PropTech at Apartments.com. And, just the perspective I gained from kind of being in all three of the major fields of the industry, I think has helped me kind of identify opportunities for improvement.
Excellent. And thank you both for joining us. In addition, a little bit of background for me is not only am I on the MLS side, but I was actually in a brokerage before as well that also focused on rentals. So we think this is a really fascinating conversation to have, one that maybe most of us have not focused on as much as we could for how big a piece of the market rentals really are, and especially where they start off with and the ultimate relationship management cycle for many real estate agents and transactions. So let's jump right into that. And Ishai, we'll start off with you. What's organized real estate missing out on by not leveraging or promoting the rental industry the way they should?
Yeah, I mean, we obviously, like Cameron, have been evangelizing rentals in the MLS. Rental Beast and its core built a rental MLS. And what's happening is because the MLS systems aren't capturing the majority of the rental inventory, they're missing a very large commission pocket. So kind of the first thing I would say is we at Rental Beast built a database that now has access to nearly 9 million rental properties that don't exist in any MLS. And through those 9 million rental properties, we are tracking about $12 billion in available leasing commissions. So that's kind of a large commission pocket that agents aren't able to tap into through the traditional MLS marketplace. I think the second, and maybe even more important kind of miss, is the demographical shift on what's the new buyer looking like, being millennials and Gen Zs taking the majority of the buy side of the business. That same group of people represent almost 70% of the rental population. So from our perspective, if we're in the business of helping our kind of mutual customer, the agent and the broker, build a pipeline into that buyer, rentals, in our mind, is the most cost-efficient way and the most scalable way to do it.
Excellent. And Cameron, same question to you, and especially with your diversification of your background, I know that's something that really interests you, is the diversification of business for rentals.
Yeah, absolutely. From the MLS perspective, MLSs are focused on single-family home for sale. Residential for sale. And that's fine because they do a really good job at it. They have a great insight into what the market is. But to Ishai's point, there's a huge market when it comes to rentals. And that market includes both the commissions that Ishai talked about, but also, the potential renters who are out there looking to move or move up or, et cetera. And so, the opportunity and what organized real estate is missing right now is all about being relevant. So, how do they meet the needs of the modern consumer who is stuck in this COVID crisis where we're seeing significant amounts of people moving out of major metro areas and into the surrounding suburbs? That affects the market in a really big way. And, here, Apartments.com, we're driving 70 million people a month to Apartments.com, potential renters. And the question is, are they seeing what the market is? And so we get feeds from MLSs, from third-party vendors, from, property management companies, et cetera. But at the end of the day, if the MLS is supposed to be that critical, data link for the brokers and agents. Are they really meeting that need if they're not out there getting the rental agents and the rental properties?
I want to add one thing just because I think it's very apropos. We hear this a lot from agents now is the sales market is so hot. I don't even have the time to think about rentals, but almost always that's followed with, inventory is really tight. And I guess the simple question I ask them is, all right, inventory is really tight. You have all these buyers, right? Demand is really, really high. If that buyer can't find a place to live, to buy, what do? Like, how do you help them? How do you maintain the relationship? And I would say 9 out of 10 times, these buyers end up in a rental. So rentals, I think, shouldn't just be perceived as a hedge for a downturn on the sales market. It's very relevant now because of supply shortages. And it's just a great way to diversify the business. I think that's what Cameron is evangelizing kind of through and through.
Yeah, to add to that, prior to me going into buying and selling my own homes, I rented 14 different properties, one per year after I got out of college. And I'll tell you that none of the 14 rental agents I worked with ended up helping me with the sale and purchase of my future homes because they didn't treat it as relationship management. So we want to come back to that point for sure. But, as our friends at CMLS say, to your point, Cameron, MLSs are all about making the markets work. And this is a huge part of the market that we really need to help focus on. So while we want to make the market work, we still have to understand that the rental business is different from the residential business. So Ishai, why is treating rentals the same as residential properties one of the worst things an MLS or brokerage can do if you're really serious about wanting to grow your rental market?
I mean, I think in general, rentals are just a slightly different business. And, I'll give 3 examples that I think are very real and the way MLS potentially think about treating rentals. And it starts with, of course, ingesting data into the MLS. So if we just simply look at the traditional listing ingestion form that most MLSs have, oftentimes they'll just treat the rental listings very similarly to sales listings. In some cases, like MRED, and I think is one of the slides we'll show, you actually added some specialized field for rentals. However, even within these forms, we're talking about the vast majority of the questions asked. I mean, we're talking 85%, 88%, and we just showed a couple of examples. It could be much worse. I think MRED is one of the leaders here, are just completely irrelevant. So there is a lot of streamlining that can be done when people want to ingest rental data into the system. Second thing I would say is, I'm a landlord. I've been on that side of the transaction. I have my own rental properties. I had 5 vacancies this year. It's very difficult for me to go and input 5 listings one at a time. So when we work with rentals and we ingest data, we have batch upload opportunities. We give people opportunities to connect a feed directly from their property management software, or if they've built a proprietary data feed, just really making it easy to ingest the data. But even if you've accomplished all that, there are other 2 critical points that I think are very rarely thought of. One is search. So let's assume you've captured all the right data fields. And I know we're all working hard with RESO on kind of defining what are those right data fields for rentals, and we're excited about that. You gotta let users search properly for these fields, right? Because if all the data is there, but you can never search by it, it's kind of useless. And maybe more important than both of these things combined is the issue of data maintenance on rentals. The shelf life of a rental property is often counted in hours, and I don't think MLSs operate in that kind of cadence, right? A listing comes in from an agent, it's a sales listing, it's going to stay on the market for a few weeks or a few months. So, I know that for our part, we've had to build an insane amount of technology and a ton of just people. And I know CoStar is kind of the leader in that field as well, at keeping the data as close to real time so that it's usable. And we can talk about specific data fields here, but those are, to me, the 3 key elements: data ingestion, followed by search, and all, kind of superseded by maintenance for this to really work as an efficient marketplace.
Yeah, I think
sorry, go ahead, Chris.
I was just saying, I definitely think we'll see a subgroup in the future to get on those fields. I don't know if we'll want to cover that in the panel today, but Cameron, for apartments.com, I did also want to ask you about that ingestion of data. Obviously, you guys are working nationally, handling a lot of that. And you've also talked a little bit about getting that information into and out of MLSs. So if you want to talk a little bit about the data side for apartments.com and add on to that, that'd be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, what it comes down to for us is, we're mostly on the search side. So, we do a really good job. That's how we've climbed to be number one in the search space. But all that depends on having quality data for them to find, right? So, it's one thing to have a great search, but having that quality data is key. And, the way I look at this is what we try to do within apartments.com, and what I suggest the MLSs should do, is start thinking like renters. And, I've been in the rental market in New York, in Florida, in Manhattan. And, what was I looking for? I needed square footage, how many bedrooms, the price, the fees, the appliances, pet friendly, yes, no, and access to, access to a dryer and washer. Like those are the things that matter to me, because everything else I could tell from the photos or the comments. So, I mean, that's just a few fields that need to be filled in. And that's when our listing input form on apartments.com is essentially completely simple like that. It's basically like, 10 or 15 fields. And then we allow the search for the drill down into the comment section. So, there's an opportunity to let the photos do the talking. And the MLSs, traditionally they look at it as this is a property. And that's not really what a rental is about. The rental is about a place to live rather than the qualities of the property. So the siding, the roofing, all that stuff that MLSs typically are trained to ask for is totally unnecessary in rentals.
Mm-hmm. So one of the things I wanted to ask both of you, when you're talking about the inefficiency of how we kind of handle rental data right now and how quickly that pace moves, think about especially like the large properties, people who have identical units, property managers, what they're working with how fast things move. What can an MLS do better to help get this kind of information in? And what can we do to help work with some of these outside vendors?
Yes, if you don't mind, I'll just jump in on that. I mean, that's a great question. I think first the MLS has to make the decision that they actually want to care about rental listings. And it's not a small question, because the board of directors are volunteer leaders, and they're probably most of them involved just on the residential for sale side. So that's also their experience level. So, if an MLS decides they want to be involved, they need to get some people on the board who know what they're talking about in terms of rentals. But from a mechanical perspective, the MLS, if they want to start populating listing information into the MLS, make the input simpler, A, and then B, allow listing upload. So property management companies and, complexes, they have data sets that they're willing to provide. And if the MLS can make it easy for them, and can control the quality of the input, I think that's a super easy way for the MLS to really start to populate their database.
So Ishai, there was something that Cameron said there that I wanted to ask you about, which is, what will make an MLS care about rentals? I know you've done some studies because you're in most of the major metro areas across the country now, and you've done some studies about inventory comparison. So what is available for rentals versus available in the MLS? Can you talk a little bit about that and give us some insights into the difference there?
Yeah, I mean, if you look broadly nationally, I think MLSs cover less than 15% of the overall inventory, and that's probably skewed in a few markets where MLSs have maybe 40% or 30%, but that's just a handful of markets around the country. So we have some key major markets where the vast majority of inventory never makes it into the MLS. I think the secondary issue is even the inventory in the MLS is often effectively a disincentive for anybody that represents prospective tenants, because the cooperative compensation is so low or often non-existent. That's really, I have a very intimate relationship with this data collection. I've made it my life's mission for the past decade. So it's just really, really hard. It's really hard to find all these properties. It's hard to ingest them. It's even harder to keep them well maintained. So I have my simple answer to the question, obviously, and to be blunt, just this cold rental beast. It took us millions of dollars in a decade of experience, and we're still learning on how to manage this beast. So, but I agree with Cameron. The first stop is these MLSs need to decide at the board level that, all right, we're in the business we're the largest marketplace that helps people find a place to live, and we're effectively ignoring, either intentionally or unintentionally, 50 or 60% of the population in this marketplace. And with that, all the benefits that we've discussed earlier, the billions in commissions and the early access to home buyers and all that. So if they decide that they want to get serious about it, I think today there are some good options out there, and apartments.com can provide a tremendous amount of demand generation. Certainly, Rental Beast can provide the access to the inventory and all the back-end tools that make the transaction safe. But inventory missing comes up as the number one issue of why MLSs haven't become a dominant rental marketplace everywhere.
Absolutely. And just as a stat from MRED's marketplace, we average between 10 to 11,000 active rentals on a normal basis, and that's only half of the market. So even where we are pretty well developed from a rental standpoint, we're still missing out on a lot of opportunity there. So I totally agree. So we've gotten some great feedback from you guys. For next steps, solutions, or any other final thoughts, Cameron, I'll start with you. How can organized real estate and brokerages better support rental agents and firms? Anything else you want to add?
Well, I think I've covered, the high points, but it really does. It's not going to happen organically unless the board and the CEO are behind, deciding that, hey, this is important. And look, as a former MLS exec myself, it wasn't a focus of mine. It was something I thought was important, and I brought to my board, and they said, "Look, it's not a priority right now," and that was probably 6 years ago. So, unfortunately, COVID is showing us that by the time it is a priority, you're already caught short in terms of being able to actually do what you need to do to serve your members, and so I just think taking a hard look, and I know that, for instance, Stellar MLS is doing some really good work on talking to their rental agents, property management companies, et cetera, to decide, hey, what do you want? And that's probably the heart of this whole thing, is asking your members, what do you want? And then finding ways to provide it to them.
Absolutely. Ishak?
Yeah, I actually see it happening. I think COVID might be a trigger. I think Cameron probably evangelizing for a while. We're a relatively newer entrant to the MLS space. We've been around for a while, but we've only been dealing and working with MLSs for a couple of years. I saw it highlighted at CMLS. Here we are at the RESO event talking about it. You have MLS executives like Cameron going around, and I'm talking to MLSs all day, every day, and we're engaged with a whole bunch of them. So I see a lot of kind of attention being put on it, and we're very excited about it. Obviously, whatever we can do to help facilitate the discussion or help find a solution, that's what we exist to do. So we're happy to do it, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk about it.
Fantastic. And thank you both for joining us today. We will put a plug in for day 3 for Pain Point Sessions, where if you want to discuss in further detail why the industry hasn't pursued rentals and what more can be done, certainly a great opportunity to bring it up there on that last day of the conference. So we hope that you learned a lot about rentals. You understand why that you need to expand your data set to start thinking about rentals and come up with a solution. Maybe start putting that into your roadmaps over the next few months about how you can better support the rental market. Otherwise, thank you very much for attending Bringing Rentals to the Pros, and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Cameron.
Thanks, Chris. You too, Ishay.